So there have been a lot of people due to the recent war arguing that Russia is in fact not part of European civilization, not white, not whatever. Now, it's obvious that these beliefs are very politically motivated. It's the same type of people who would have referred to Germans as Huns during World War One, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. Like Germans are about as pure white as you can get, and most of them would have like zero or almost zero East Asian ancestry, like Hun or whatever you want to call it. But yet, in World War One, the Germans were in fact mocked by Americans as being Huns, with the implication, oh, they're not racially pure, they're not truly European. So it's obvious that this whole thing is done out of convenience based on the current military alliances rather than any kind of objective fact over who is more European, who is more white, who is more culturally European or Western or what have you. But I'm going to break down the reasoning and why it's bullshit. Firstly, okay. Number one, here are the arguments for why Russia is not part of European civilization. Firstly, they will say because a lot of Russians identify with the ideology of Eurasianism as promoted by Alexander Dugin, which promotes the idea that Russia is not a European country, but a Eurasian country. Second, the fact that much of Russia geographically is outside of Europe, although the majority of the population is geographically within Europe. Thirdly, the fact that within the 20th century, there's, especially more recent decades, there has been a lot of immigration to Russia from majority non-white, mostly Muslim countries. And there's also been a considerable amount of race mixing. Again, mostly within the past 100 years or even past 50 years. Okay, here are my arguments against why those would preclude Russia from being European. Number one, the fact that some Russians don't identify as being European. Absolutely. Most people, perhaps the majority of people in the UK, also do not identify as being European. With Brexit, there was a major movement in the UK to redefine themselves. No, we are not European. We are British. We are part of the Anglosphere. We identify more with the US, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand than with continental Europe. And when I went to the UK a few years, like back in 2019, I commonly saw people and heard people refer to continental Europe simply as Europe, implying that Europe is an external entity and that the UK is not part of Europe. So again, and this is really funny, the same British who were so eager to define themselves as non-European back then are suddenly, right now with the war in the Ukraine, saying, no, 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 we are European. It's those bloody Russians that are not European. We're the most European. We are the ones who gave birth to European civilization. It's those fucking Russians who are not European. No, we are the heart of Europe. It's like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You fucking Brits were the most adamant that you were not European a few years ago, and now all of a sudden, oh, you are European and it's the Russians who are not European. No, no, no. That is flagrant fucking bullshit. It is such bullshit that I cannot even comprehend it. Like, it is so obvious that the definition of European is precluded on political conveniences. Like, oh, during World War I and World War II, the Germans are suddenly not European. Oh, now the Russians are suddenly not European. I bet during the Napoleonic era, France was suddenly not European. It seems like whoever is the current enemy of the Anglosphere is deemed not European. But yet, for some reason, the Anglosphere itself, when it's convenient, also gets to declare themselves not European. You know, Anglos... You know, it's just in the same way Jews are white when it's convenient and non-white when it's convenient. Like, Anglos are European when it's convenient and not European when it's convenient. Like, I'm sorry, but it's fucking true. Okay, secondly, the argument that, okay, go back to that, okay. Yes, there are many Russians who don't define themselves as part of European civilization, but it doesn't mean they aren't. Like, at least that they historically aren't. Like, people can redefine themselves all kinds of ways, but it doesn't change the historical reality. It's the same, it's not just the UK. Like, Portugal, many people in Portugal believe in the ideology of Lusotropicalism. They say, oh, we're not really European, we're more culturally, we're closer to Brazil, actually. Same with some people in Spain, although I think not as many as in Portugal, but some people in Spain will say, oh no, we're actually culturally closer to Latin America, that to the Spanish parts of Latin America than, or even Latin America in general, than we are to Europe. And it's the same. You get some people in Hungary or Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, even Finland who say, like, oh, we're actually of an Asiatic origin with our language family and our heritage. We're more Asiatic than European. So again, like, it's not just Russia or even the UK where you have people say this. There's a lot of countries in Europe where you have people say shit like this. And I think it's partly because they feel like Europe is a sinking ship, so they want to latch themselves onto whatever other identity they can. Even if those other identities are actually in line with countries that have a objectively far worse standard of living and far worse economy than the European countries do. So I mean, there's those factors, but I think there's other factors too. Like, as I was saying, okay, like the argument that Russia's not European because a great deal of Russia is geographically not in Europe. Well, these same people who say that are the biggest supporters of American domination of Europe, and they will say that America has the rightful place as the leader of European civilization. You know what percentage of the United States of America is geographically in Europe? 0%. 0% of the United States is geographically located in Europe. 0% of Canada, Australia, or New Zealand are geographically located in Europe. But for some reason, they have no problem with these countries being considered part of European civilization. Not only that, but they have no problem with America, frankly, making Europe its bitch and being the leader of European civilization and bossing everyone else around and putting military bases up everybody's ass in literally every fucking European country. They have no problem with that. They have absolutely no problem with that. But, oh, because Russia has a lot of land in Siberia, oh, therefore they're just not part of European civilization, you know? But Hawaii totally is part of European civilization. Yeah, okay. So there's that. There's that. And then, okay, that brings me to my next factor. Okay, race mixing and mass immigration. Yes, these things are happening in Russia. It's an issue there. It's a problem there, just as it's a problem in fucking Western Europe, Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand. It's a problem in all these places. Like, the only places that aren't really experiencing it as much are, like, you know, Poland and the other countries in that part of Eastern Europe that are not Russia. Like, a lot of them, although even a few of them are experiencing it a bit with their gypsy population that has been there for centuries, but they're not experiencing mass immigration to the same degree, not yet. But it doesn't mean they won't be in the near future, because the elite are heavily trying to push it on those countries. And I think it's only a matter of time before either they relent or they fight back. But one way or another, I think this issue is going to become a big issue in those Eastern European countries in the near future. So, I mean, but yeah, I mean, this idea like, oh, there's immigration to Russia. Have you seen fucking France lately? Have you seen the United States lately? Give me a break, you know? Like, I think what you need to do to find if a country's European, ask not what the demographics are today, but ask, like, what were the baseline demographics, let's say, in the 1940s or 50s or 30s or whatever. Like, that's really the question you have to ask, because every Western country today basically is getting flooded by non-white immigrants. And yes, there's mixing occurring on a large scale. Like, Russia's not unique there. So if that disqualifies Russia, then fuck, that disqualifies France. That disqualifies Sweden. Like, I mean, these arguments are just becoming so hypocritical. So yeah, I mean, is Russia a culturally European country? I mean, it's a majority Christian country, a majority white country, and it has many of the same, like if you look at, say, the traditions of Russian art, Russian classical music, Russian architecture, Russian literature, it all falls in line with the European classical tradition. Like a lot of their cultural creations are very much, they feel very European. Like St. Petersburg looks like a very European city. Moscow, in parts, looks like a very European city. Tchaikovsky and Mussorgsky, other Russian composers, sound very European. Russian literature, like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, very much in line with the European literary tradition. So, like, I'm sorry, but to say that Russia's culturally non-European, I mean, they've produced a lot of culture that feels very European throughout the decades, throughout the centuries. So, like, I'm sorry, but that's just fucking horseshit. Now, okay, are there parts of Russia that probably aren't really European? Yeah, okay, I'll concede that. Like, if you go into Siberia, certain parts of, and I'm not even saying all of Siberia, but say, like, parts that are not majority Russian and never have been, like, say, the Tuvan Republic, or some regions of the Caucasus, like Chechnya and Dagestan, I would agree, those parts probably aren't really culturally European and never were. But as a whole, I would say, yeah, Russia is part of European civilization. So, I mean, and if you're going to, and again, with disqualifying certain parts, like, I would argue Hawaii probably never really was part of European civilization. So, again, if you're going to make those arguments about some parts of Russia, then I think you could make those arguments about some parts of the United States. I'd southern Texas, like the areas around Laredo and other parts of the Rio Grande Valley, I'd argue aren't really part of European civilization and never have been. So none of it in Canada isn't part of European civilization and never really has been. So again, like, yes, you can make those arguments about certain specific regions of Russia, which are a minority of their population and land, but you could make the same arguments about certain regions of the United States, Canada, or Australia. So yeah, I mean, yeah, certain parts of the Northern Territory in Australia, I believe, are majority Aboriginal and always have been. I'm not sure exactly on the demographics there, but yes, I do think there are some regions of Australia that aren't really culturally European and never have been. So yeah, I mean, those are my thoughts on that.